No.
There we go.
This cover, again, attractive, Mauritius to Adelaide, 1859. The key of this, though, people may know there was a P&O service from Australia through to Suez by way of Mauritius for about a year. Now, this particular letter and the Mark X Mauritius is shown on the right-hand side. It missed the boat by a day, so it paid 4p for the ship letter rate as opposed to 8p if it had been the packet, and was a month later than it would have been if it had managed to get the packet. So by missing it a day, it was very much delayed. The next one, please.
Excuse me, I got a cat. Sure.
I collect late covers. Now, I've just stressed how if you miss the packet, you have to wait and hope there's a ship opportunity that comes up. But the box for mail to go overseas closed at 2 o'clock in Port Louis. But there was if you paid an extra fee up to 2.30, it's 6p. Between 2.30 and 3 is a shilling, and that's what one of these covers. The two bottom stamps on the left-hand side, paying the shilling additional rate for 2.30 to 3 o'clock. You get a special service. After 3 o'clock, you pay 5 shillings. Now you're talking in 1860, 5 shillings you're paying. You've got to want that letter to go because that's a tremendous amount of money. There are 2 known covers with the 5 shilling stamp on, and I have one of them. Anyway, that's the 233. The next cover fits into the same part of it when it comes up. This one also to France. This is paying the 6p. So the rate basic rate's 8p, but this paid 1 2p to go to France. Another neat cover, which always looks nice. But you've got to know what the basic rate is because there's no marking of late fee. So anyway, I'm just building up a collection of these and I enjoy them. Next one, please. Mauritius to Melbourne, 1874. A nice looking cover going to the captain of a French ship by way of the French consulate. Has a 10p accounting mark, which is the amount owing to the GB. The Godavari was a packet vessel, and it took the mail up to Aden before it then caught the normal mail through Aden coming down to Australia. And the dates of arrival of Melbourne, the 27th of June, are consistent with Tabit and a whole series of vessels that got it to Melbourne. Last but not least, thank you then, Frank, just to show that I go in both directions of this Mauritius and Australian mail, Albany in WA to Mauritius. Interestingly enough, it has and I'm keen to follow this up, an SMR ship mailroom mark on the bottom left. And I've looked in the WA book so far, and I can't find that particular mark. So something to research. This was a London acquisition, by the way. And going to Redouille in Mauritius, which is one of the rarer postmarks. But a tidy, interesting cover, and I enjoyed acquiring that. Thank you. That is all that I have. But now, do we have a Tony Stevens yet? We have a question.
You got a question, John?
Yeah, what I saw it on the bottom.
Why did the UK, this is from Alan, why did the UK get a fee for your second last cover?
Because they carried the mail from Aden to Australia.
All right, that's it. That's the only question we got.
That's an accounting fee. There's a whole series of those accounting marks on Mauritius mail up to about that time. Okay, now are we going to skip over?
Yeah, we'll skip over Tony unless
Griffin?
he's arrived. You in the because a couple of people come on board. Is Tony Griffin with us? Because I can't see if I can only see the speaker.
Okay, well, if we move on to Alan Shatton then, please.
There you go, Alan.
Good evening, all. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So I had a bad day today. I took my car in for a service and it had a little fluttering noise. And the little fluttering noise turned out to cost me $800 because there was a hole in the bottom of the car.
Oh,
So I'm not happy, but I'll press on. Just thought you'd like to know. I've got a few postcards here. This is one you've seen before, I think, but it's from Blythe Road, which was not really a post office. And I think this is the only example of Blythe Road on an entire item. It was subsequently known as Caprona after the 20th of July. There's a postmark of Blythe on the stamp, and Blythe is upside down on the whole postmark, which is not unique. There's 4 or 5 Tasmanian postmarks where the town is upside down. And the reverse shows a magnificent view of Penguin, Tasmania, a very muddy looking penguin, which is not that far from Blythe Road. Next slide, please. This is from a small village to a tiny village. Bismarck is up the back of Hobart, and you probably wouldn't be able to find it on the map. Upper Huon is today known as Judbury, and it's on the Huon River, quite a long way up the Huon River. One is R, the other is RR, and I'm not sure what a cover from R to RR actually equals. It might be an RRR plus. Next slide, please. The feature of this card is the view of Deloraine. Deloraine's quite a major centre in the north of Tasmania. Lamana Junction isn't far away from it. But there were quite a few cards produced in this format with a from and the name of the town and a picture of the town. And I think this one's very good. The building in the centre is still there. I think it might be arts and crafts these days. Next slide, please. This is a letter card, as you can see. There were 5 series of letter cards. This is the 5th series. There were 6 cards in the series. There were 12,000 of each card issued, but the number of used copies is minuscule for every one of the cards. There are only 11 used copies of this card known. There's a gentleman in London that's conducted a census, and this is the most popular of all of the 6 cards in the series. The others have only got 4 or 5 copies known. It's a peep of Barnes Bluff from Lake Windermere, which is supposed to be a tourist attraction, but I doubt that anyone's ever visited it because it's so remote. And it's a redirected card to Belgium, which is interesting as well. Next slide, please. This is a large envelope. It's from Hagley with an excellent strike of the unframed circular date stamp. There's not that many excellent strikes of unframed circular date stamps around. It's southwest of Launceston. It went to Melbourne, and it's got the duplex 41 bar numeral on the stamps. Next slide, please. And just to prove that I don't only collect Tasmania, this is a Swedish card. From 1929 to 36, Sweden issued 20 of these cards with the views, as they were called. This is number 3. 19,000 of each card were issued. Now, a lot of postcards in Sweden were issued in quantities of 30 million. So this is a very low issue card. Used examples are pretty scarce. They normally go for $70 or $80. And this particular one has magnificent calligraphy. It's absolutely superb. I can't read Italian, but I'm sure if I could, it would read as well as it's written. Thank you very much.
Typo there, by the way. Apologies to John.
Yes.
Yep, sorry, John. You're up.
All right. These are items taken from the collection, and as can be seen from the pages that I've submitted, not just the cover only, they mainly sort of cover the Indonesian, or as the Netherlands East Indies group of islands, some 17,000 of them, where the Dutch, having formed their airline in 1919, is now the leading continuous airline in the world. But in this particular period, they were flying between the islands with an airline sort of arrangement, and they just run these particular flights, and the covers like this. There's nothing extremely valuable about them, but it's an unusual country to collect. And this is before the Japanese invasion, of course. But it's the special is a flight regular service from to Batavia to it's an interesting cover in itself. Next. Oh, this one, yes, this is part of the plane that they in actual built in Holland, and it came out by a special flight, and it later, the cover here is the actual back of the cover of the cover itself, and the card with the extra postmarks on that. And it started out at Haarlem in the Netherlands, and then to Amsterdam, and had the special postmark on that in red. And it ended up in Batavia, but of course the plane would hop from country to country, and coming from the Netherlands down into Batavia on the island of Java. So it's a very interesting one, and because of the new plane that they had introduced, because in that particular period, 1933, the world airlines were still in their infancy. It's a bit like Qantas and the others. And this was an interesting aeroplane. They entered this plane in the London to Melbourne race, but unfortunately in India, they landed there for refueling, and somebody there ran into their plane. So they were pushed out of the race. But this is a very interesting cover. Next. Oh yes, now this is an interesting one. The special postmark on these, it says sent by radio, and the letter was posted from the British American Tobacco Company at Semarang, and it received the Cirebon, well, we'll call it a triangular cancel, and it had the franking of 90 cents, keeping in mind that the UPU letter rate was 15 cents and the airmail and the radio service was 75 cents. They, in placing this on there, they were indicating that the actual content of the letter had been transmitted by radio, and the letter would be posted afterwards to the recipient in London. It's a very interesting one, and developed through using the worldwide cables. They would probably have to send it radio through to Singapore to have it put onto the cables to be sent overseas. Next. Well, here's a wartime, 1940, whilst the German war was raging, the Netherlands East Indies was still an independent country, a Netherlands country, even though they'd been invaded by Germany. And this is a registered letter from Batavia, and it received their censorship mark en route. And their route was an interesting route. They would go from Amsterdam to Rome, Rome to Cairo, Cairo to Basra, Basra to Karachi, and then from Karachi to Calcutta, and then Bangkok, on to Singapore, and Singapore to Jakarta. So it's an interesting one. And I have a little bit of a history there about the fact that when the outbreak of war, France ceased allowing overflying of their territories. Now, KLM, the Dutch airline, then terminated its airmail route at Naples and handed the Amsterdam destination airmail to the Australian post, the Italian post, and they forwarded it by train as part of the UPU. And then Nazi Germany with war soon saw the Netherlands invaded, and the Naples Amsterdam train connection ceased. And Italy entered the war against Nazi Germany alongside Nazi Germany, and the UPU airmail route ceased. So KLM opened up a new airmail service from Bandiong to Lida. That's in Israel area. So it's an interesting part of the overseas registered mail at that time. Next. Yes. Now this is a cover where it's a UPU postal stationery, which is a 7.5 cent yellow Bista postcard, and it's postmarked Veltevreden. Now Veltevreden is a suburb of Batavia on the island of Java. And they added a 2.5 gulden carmine rose recess printed issue, and it appears to be from old stock, 1920. And this was specially cancelled with a violet 17th of October 27 specially designed Batavia postal cancel. And its design included the image of an aeroplane, so it appears to be a special delivery rate resulting from the card's manuscript writing on the top of the cover. The 2.5 gulden franking on the postcard is not based on weight, but appears to represent a special Batavian airmail service charged before the 1928 regular KLM airmail return flights commenced. So it's a sort of an odd one where the whole of the airline business was developing constantly. Next. Now here is when, in actual fact, the Netherlands East Indies Australia Postal Service entered into a contract with the KLM airline, and what they did was they overprinted a series of special stamps and with the aeroplanes that you see. And it appears that whilst the 22-gram registered letter departed, it arrived at Amsterdam Central Station, and it appears that the difference between the actual charges were refunded to the airline, with obviously the Netherlands East Indies Post retaining their own costs for printing stamps and carriage. So that's a joint arrangement. It was sort of a private enterprise within the Netherlands. Next. Thank you.
That's it.
Thanks, John. Philip, are you ready to go?
Yes.
Okay.
When you're ready. Well, first of all, let me, I'm aware of the time constraints, but let me introduce myself. I haven't been at a meeting such as this. My interests are still emerging, particularly in postal history, and they surround really the covers and stationery of the early kangaroo issues. These are not necessarily my favourite covers, although I think of them fondly, but they are covers that show the correct use, solo use of the first 6 values of the kangaroo issue. Naturally, we begin with the halfpenny, and the halfpenny was used solo for a number of reasons, including for newspaper wrappers, but it was also the rate that applied to printed matter before the halfpenny war tax was added in November 1918. Printed matter in this context were largely circulars, business circulars reproduced from an original. And to be eligible for the halfpenny rate, it was said that at least 20 identical copies were to be printed and posted at the same time, and with a label 20 posted marking added to each cover. Now, it turns out that the 20 posted marking didn't seem to be added to a lot of the printed matter postings. This cover does show a very nice in blue 20 posted marking, and that's why I like this cover. Next, please. Moving on from the half, you come to the 1 penny, and of course the 1 penny being the standard letter rate up to a ½ ounce, and for all postcards posted in Australia up to the war tax. There's many such examples. This is actually a picture postcard where the postcard was produced not in Australia, but at the Tate Gallery, and it shows a picture of an image of a painting labelled "The Valley of the word that I could never pronounce." It's obviously Welsh. It's a valley in the northwest of Wales. The sender of the card, who was in Isis Junction, makes mention that the name of the painting was certainly a queer name in the postcard. I like the card because of the words. I like the card because of the interesting franking. Isis Junction. If you look up Isis Junction, you'll find that it's basically a rail siding now, and it was basically a rail siding back in 1913. I also like the card because the stamp shows a scarce constant flaw, a flaw associated with the rare plate A, break above N of 1. And if you look very, very carefully, you might see that break on the little image that I've provided. Next, thanks, Frank. Halfpenny to 1 penny now to the tuppence grey. In October 1920, the authorities decided to move the basic postage rate, which was 1 pence plus the halfpenny war tax, to 2 pence per ½ ounce, effectively increasing the rate by a full 1 penny. The stamp here is punctured OS. It's a 3rd watermark, so not terribly unusual. What I like about this cover is that it does cover, or it does meet the new postal rate shortly after that postal rate was put in place in October. The letter was posted in November. Next, thanks, Frank. Going from the 2 penny to the tuppence halfpenny blue, which was, of course, the letter rate to foreign countries, that is, countries outside of the British Empire, through to the war tax. This is an interesting one, reflecting the first presentation, which showed a number of items that missed the ship. This is another example. It was marked as going to Sweden via the RMS Mongolia, but it has an open by censor tape, but handwritten on the back is "Return from censor, too late for dispatch." There's a Sydney CDS ship room marking on the back a day after the initial posting in Sydney. I presume the letter never got to Sweden because there's no back stamps to indicate that it arrived at all. Next, please. Thanks, Frank. The threepence, there's a slight error here in the words. 3 pence was the standard letter rate to foreign countries between October 23 and August 1930. There was a 8-month period just before this period when the letter rate had been changed, but it was returned to tuppence in October 1923. The stamp is a third watermark, tied to B. And the thing that I like about this cover is the, I think, unusual roller cancel. Although in my short experience in this game, I've never seen it before. It reads British Empire Exhibition, London, April 1924, Australia's Opportunity. Next, please, Frank. The final cover is a 4 pence. It's a registered letter from an address in Queensland, which I wasn't familiar with, but it's actually quite a sizable little town now, and it was in 1914, quite close to Toowoomba, Goombungie. What's interesting about this is that it's not stationary. Frequently, the 4 pence was a stationary item for registered mail. 4 pence obviously was the registration rate, 3 pence, but the standard letter with it plus the standard letter rate, 1 pence for mail, registered mail within Australia. The red and black registration label 376 is interesting, but of nothing remarkable about it. I liked it because of the unusual franking from Goombungie, and as always, the orange stamp looks great on cover. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip, and welcome to participate in our activities.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you. Yep. Graham,
Yep,
off you go.
good, thank you. Right, the first one is these are all on different topics of GB postal history, none of them connected to the others, but they're all covers that I like. This one I like because I like too late and posted since items, and this is an early plate 3 tuppenny blue with the white lines added, cancelled with the Maltese cross, which is a scare. This plate was used right up until 1849, so most of them are cancelled with the later cancellations. So I just like it because it combines the early tuppenny blue and the posted after. Okay, next please. Yeah, now this is, I like covers that combine postal history with real history, and this was offered to me by a London dealer, and very few, I wouldn't recognise many names of relevance to Melbourne from my first years because I lived in England until I was 16, but I did spend 2 years at Wesley College, so I knew straight away when I saw this addressee that he was a former headmaster of Wesley, having for 2 years had a morning sing-song in Adamson Hall. But the postcard itself is of interest because it's the threepenny postcard, which was introduced for the rate that was only in force for a very short time. So very few of them were actually used because at that time it was actually not much more expensive to send a letter. And as a result, it was for the mail rate to Australia and to India mostly, but for postcards. But the another point about Adamson was that apparently he was he imported the first powered aircraft into Australia, although he didn't actually fly himself. So, okay, I think next, I like this one again because it's a late fee cover, but it's an OHMS cover, which of course is postage free. OHM government gets the free postage, but they don't get exempted from a late fee, so they have to pay the late fee halfpenny to go into the late box on the Holyhead to Kingstown packet. And the real history part of it is addressed to John Davies, who was in the cabinet of the British Prime Minister at the time, and it was a wartime cabinet that apparently was known as the Garden Suburb because they actually lived in tents at the back of 10 Downing Street. Okay, the next, thanks. This one I like because Irish postmarks, there were 4 towns that use these cancels that look like signet rings Dublin, Kingstown, New Bliss and Newtown were the 4 towns. But normally you only ever see one town on one cover, but this managed to get cancelled by both Dublin in transit and Kingstown as the arrival. No, Dublin's the arrival and Kingstown was the transit. And in actual fact, there was only a very short period when they could have actually overlapped in use, because the earliest and latest dates for the 2 councils only give a period of about a month overlap. So it's very scarce to get that combination. Okay, thanks, Frank. Now, this is actually really probably my all-time favourite cover, because it's from Dublin to Belfast, which of course, there must be lots of covers from Dublin to Belfast, but this isn't Belfast, Ireland, this is Belfast, Victoria. Port Fairy was named Belfast for a short period, only in the, when was it, from 1848 to 1887, it was known as Belfast. It was renamed by James Atkinson after his Irish birthplace. This cover is actually addressed to Atkinson's nephew, and he was a resident agent in the town until 1869. The postal history aspect of the cover is the posted since mark, which is the latest recorded date for this posted since GPO mark of Dublin. I've also got, it seems that the posted since marks probably ceased altogether about this time, because the other mark was the town receiver posted since, and I've got the latest date of that is the next day. So obviously that was the end of the posted since marks in May 1858. Okay, thank you. And just as a change from English covers, this is a French cover from the Cabinet de l'Empereur Napoleon III. What I like about this is that he gets free postage in France, but no way the Poms would let him off. They charged him 5p for transmission in England. I looked up to try and work out. Actually, at that time, it appears that the postage was charged 5p for the French bit and 5p for the English bit, so they got in for their own bit. Right, okay, I think that's all. Thank you.
Oh, you got one question?
Joe?
Yep.
Can I just get asked one question? There's a question in the chat room,
Yeah.
and it's from Alan Shatton. It says the Dublin cover has a Kilmanor hand stamp. Is that rare?
Sorry, which cover was that? Oh, that was the signet ring one. Sorry, yes, the signet ring one. I'm not sure how scarce that mark would be. It depends. It's very hard to get scarcity ratings on those Irish marks because there's not a lot of literature on them, actually.
Thank you.
All right, Joe, you're next.
Yep. Thanks. Thanks, Frank. Ah, yes. This is, I just like the story of this. This is before we had Panama Canal, and if you came out of Valparaiso in Chile, there's a 5 centavos imprinted stamp and plus a 10 centavos additional stamp. You had to go north overland or south on your way to, well, this case to Bordeaux. And it rather interests me that you know, it wasn't just Australia had various routes. You know, even at the time this was happening all over the globe, I suppose. The date is actually inserted upside down. Not that you can particularly well see it, but they've actually put it in upside down. It was sent on the 8th of August, 1908. And it backstamped is on the, a bit hard to read there, is on the 5th of September 08 in Bordeaux. Yep. Anyway, Next one, please, Frank. Oh, now, Frank, this is actually not a first day cover. That 5 shillings robes is actually a second day cover, as it turns out. So it's a early usage, but we have. It was dreadful to try the contrast to the colour was to get the front to try and sort it out. But anyway, it was Imperial Airways via Pan American Canal to the Airways. To the SS Franconia in Panama. It left Sydney on the 2nd of May 1938 and arrived in Victoria, Hong Kong on the 11th of May 1938. Then Cristobal Canal Zone on the 24th of May. That red writing is just saying by air to USA only. So presumably then made it by ship down to the Canal Zone. And Miss Bronia Stuckold, who we're pleased to know that she was a miss, and she was being cared for well. She was in the care of a Mrs. D. Fells and a Mrs. M. Raj. And you probably all read about it in the society pages of the Sydney Morning Herald on Thursday, the 14th of 1938. By the age of the audience, you probably did. Anyway, next cover, but it's just an interesting roots. Yep. Okay. This one is also rotten colour, but I've been to Madang and spent some time in Madang, in Rabaul. I've been to Rabaul, and I've got a series of censored marks from the Second World War, but this one is the censored copy from the First World War with the Northwest Pacific Islands upside down, the stamp putting it up mounted incorrectly in reverse. And it's interesting, it's addressed to here, Peter Thale, Bethania near Brisbane. So, and it's censored in various ways. It's censored in blue on the front in Rabaul. It's censored in red in Brisbane on the back. And the reverse side is Brisbane, 14th of February 16, Queensland. So it took off on the 22nd of January 16 and finally arrived on the 14th of February 16. But anyway, that's my only censored copy out of Rabaul. So that's why you've got it. I like it, but it means probably very little to you, but to me it means a lot. Next one, please. Now this is a probably is my favorite cover of all time. You know, it's not the way it looks. It looks dreadful, but I love the stories. There's so much in this. It's addressed. It's to Tura, and it's Kurt Waldthausen. He was born in Germany in the 9th of the 1st, 1915, and he died in Mazzano, Switzerland on the 4th of December 2070. The number on the front is POW 102. It should have an N in front of it because where you're interned would have a letter of the state. He was interned in New South Wales. He probably was in the diplomatic corps because he served in the diplomatic corps in the US after the Second World War. Now, Portugal at this time, this is on the 27th of September 41 from Lisbon. Portugal remained neutral, but there is a catch. There's a catch-22. There's been a long-standing agreement, alliance between Portugal and England. That alliance had been going for 550 years when this was posted, so that the mail was easy to get to your Germans, in this case, in terms via Portugal because of its neutrality. They managed to get enough stamps on the envelope. It was opened by Censor 268 at Tatura. Yeah, I think that's probably enough. It's an interesting cover and an interesting people and an interesting story. Next one, please. Oh, this is a self-indulgence. So I'm sorry. This is really the grandfather who did the final artwork for this stamp had a plaque on the wall with a little engraved, I presume it's always looked like gold, but it's probably brass, of this stamp. And it was given for his part in the preparation of this so-called stamp, which is really nothing more than the Cinderella, the ideal stamp. And it was for the Jubilee International Stamp Exhibition of 1912. This almost certainly didn't travel through the mail. It looks like it ought to have, by the way it looks, but it had it. There's no evidence that it's been cancelled. It's dressed like a cover, but But I do notice if you look at the top right corner, did they leave a spot to put the 1 penny stamp on, send it through the mail? Or I'm guessing it looks like it's gone through the mail. I suspect it didn't. But my grandfather was very proud of his part of the drawing, and yes, he did the engraving on the thing himself. When he came to Australia, Ronald Harrison, he was chief artist rather than his engraver, which was his dad's job, to be the chief engraver. But he was given this as a thank you as a fairly young lad. I think he was 17 for his efforts in producing the stamp for the exhibition, the Cinderellas that came out, I think, in 21 different colours. Next one, please. I think is the last one. Yep. Now, what's unusual about this? This is the only one I have seen with a 6-penny kookaburra engraved used in Australia by itself. The other 3 copies I've seen have all gone to the US, and I think it's a double penny halfpenny rate to the US, or 3-penny straight rate with the that's right, registered 3 plus the 2 penny halfpennies. So this is somewhere fits between the 1 to 1.5 ounces internally, and it's, as I said, it's the only one I've seen that have been used internally in Australia. It's backstamped TPO2 north/down 20th of October 14/1 New South Wales, a TPO, but it's originally the CDS is Enmore, New South Wales, on the 19th of October 14th. So it's only a day later. Sent it registered. I have no idea what would have been inside it, but we can only guess there's sort of valuable documents, I assume. And certainly is unusual internally. It's pretty unusual to find an internally used, Australian used 6-penny kookaburra on cover. Thank you, Frank. That's it.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Kevin,
Yes, I'm here.
off you go.
Okay, first cover. This is one of my favourites. It's addressed to, as you can see, the Secretary of State, Washington, DC, from obviously the Australian American consul. And the important thing is about this is it is dated the 6th of December 1941, which, as you will recognise, is the day before Pearl Harbor. It had a direction typed on the lower left side, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji Islands, United States. I'm not quite sure if the cover actually went that route or not. It arrived in Washington on the 3rd of January 1942, but it is very interesting to be just before, as President Roosevelt called it, the day of infamy. Thanks, Frank. Tarina. Now, where is Tarina? The most westerly post office in New South Wales. From Tarina, you could practically throw a rock into South Australia. It was originally called Salt Creek, and it was virtually an outer branch of the Murray River. And we tried to find the place. It's still a recorded homestead, and still apparently in good order. But to find it is another matter, because once you leave the barrier highway outside Wentworth, it's all rough roads. And with my little Impreza, I wasn't too happy to take a dive into the bush, so to speak. On the rear, you can see a postmark of Tailem Bend, which rather suggests that the original Cobb&Co route would have gone via Renmark. I don't know about going down the river to Tailem Bend. It would have taken a long time. So I think it was a land route via Tailem Bend, and then eventually found itself back in Sydney. Thanks, Frank. TPO West, we've heard a few TPOs talked about today. It's very rare to see a registration label with a TPO West post office, printed post office address on it. And this was via Toowoomba, I believe. The only other state that used TPO labels was Western Australia, where we see a few rare Western Australian labels with the original work on the Trans-Australian Railway, and eventually becoming the T and Post Office train that transferred across the railway, supplying all the little towns across like Cook and Wallina, places like that. But this is quite unusual to see a printed label from a TPO. Thanks, Frank. Now, where is Nyang? It's unusual, first of all, because to see it was franked with postage due stamps, and it was reported, but apparently reached its destination without any problems. Nyang. Nyang changed its name to Torita, which of course will relieve everybody who will know where it is. But in actual fact, Torita is 8 kilometres west of Walpiop. And those people who follow Victoria's weather will know Walpiop is probably the hottest town in Victoria. Very unusual to see it that way. Thanks, Frank. Some Samurai. This is probably the earliest cover from Papua, 1909. The label is quite unique. I've never seen one before or since, or anywhere, off cover or on cover. The peculiar R, the big R, is can be seen on Norwegian registration labels, but I've never seen it anywhere else. And as such, it is exceedingly rare. And finally, Frank, the last R6 label used in PNG. This was some 35 to 40 years after Australia ceased the use of R6 labels. 2013, as far as I know, it was only ever used at Lae, and a very plain front, but covered with interesting postmarks on the rear. Okay, thank you.
That's Kevin. And Graham Porter, finish up. Off you go, Graham.
Right, thank you. This is probably my favourite cover of all. It's got a tuppenny red King George V Die 3. It has a variety on it. You can see it clearly because it's just a slight, you can't see it at all. It's under the kangaroo's tail, and you've got to get a magnifying glass to look at it. But the century of Victoria Threepenny Blue has got the flag right of tower on it, which is a recorded floor. Now, it left Hobart by ship to Melbourne. It was countermarked with a registration mark, then went down to Port Melbourne and off on the Maxon line to Canada. Now, it went to, and I got this because, as Alan Shatton will know, Sandy Point's a very important name to me because I have a holiday house at Sandy Point here in Victoria. And Sandy Point is in fact off the off the coast of Newfoundland and an island of St George's. When I was doing the homework for this, I found that, and I'll read these notes, Sandy Point is a 2,400-acre island of natural wealth in St George's Bay, on the southwest coast of Newfoundland. It was divided practically right down the middle between the Catholics and the Anglicans. The westerly, where Catholics lived, was known as up along. Easterly, where the Anglicans lived, was down along. And in the ensuing decades, the small population had multilingual people. We had people from England, Jersey, and there were French residents. But the community, when Newfoundland entered the Confederation in 1949, everybody was voluntarily or forced to remove themselves from the island, and it no longer exists. There's not a person on the island anymore. So I find that cover has an interesting story to tell, and I enjoy that particular one very much. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, this cover, again, it's unusual to get many of these King George V, but with variations on varieties on the actual stamps themselves. But there is a variety on the penny green as well in this particular case. It's a very unusual cover in that I've had a lot of trouble trying to get any sense out of anybody as to what actually happened. It shows an airmail Adelaide to Perth, but it was prior to the regular service that commenced in June of 1929. And this was posted on March of 29 from Melbourne to England. So it paid the threepenny late, it paid 9p, which is the threepenny late fee, plus the fourpenny halfpenny airmail to Perth, and then a penny halfpenny Perth to England by sea. So it's not recorded in any of the documents around, and I've had, I remember spending some time with Torsten Weller at one stage of the game trying to work out what was going on, but I think we have the postal rates correct at this stage, but it's a very interesting cover, nevertheless. Next. Now, this Bank of New South Wales letter going within the banking service, showing the 150th anniversary 9p stamp and also the twopenny on it, is very interesting because there are very few 9p violet stamps appearing on domestic mail at all, because it just didn't occur that way. The postal rate at the time of issue was 2p for standard letter. The cover with 11p paid twopenny letter rate plus 9p for the combined registration and a compensation fee of some £20. So it was quite an unusual item, and I liked that one. Thanks. Next. Yeah, this one here is, I'll just have a look at this one again. The vignette, airmail vignette by Aerial Mail by AIS Limited, which is the Australian Aerial Services Limited, was travelling from Adelaide to Hay to Melbourne. The service was inaugurated in July of 25 and it was discontinued in June 1930. This cover shows an earliest recorded date of the 21st of January 26. It's not recorded that way in most documentation, so it's a very early release of the vignette. Thank you. This cover, playing 1 and 6, is the earliest date of introduction of the 1 and 6p rate that was documented for May of 47. It's quite a complicated one and too difficult to bore you with the detail, but it was, again, a very early date of the 1 and 6p rate, which had been a lot higher to the USA prior to this date. It was some 5 shillings or so to get that done, and then the rate dropped at that particular time. So again, a nice early date cover, which I quite like in the collection. Thanks, Frank. A lovely favourite of mine to finish up with. There was never a halfpenny letter rate. And again, we've seen some kangaroos earlier on, but they were the other kangaroos, of course, and not George VI versions. That this appeared to happen because a guy that was on an American ship in Perth must have gone into town and bought a pictorial views and sent it off to the family. He went back on board the ship and he was posted back home. But it would appear that the person that he gave it to on board the ship was aware that because he was in the forces on a ship during wartime, his postage was free. But there was also the war tax had been introduced to the halfpenny, and he put it on the envelope to cover what he thought was the war tax and marked it with a US Navy circular date stamp. But he didn't have to do that because the services were exempt from a halfpenny war tax. So that's quite a unique envelope, and I was fortunate to pick that up in a collection from an English dealer who was out at one of the exhibitions here and didn't know he had it in his little pile of rubbish. So that's my lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. Well, there, that says it all. But meanwhile, has Tony Griffin appeared, Frank?
No, I don't think so.
If Tony Griffin is here, would he put his hand up, please? Oh, there's that lady again, but we don't have Tony Griffin.
Yeah, no, Tony Griffin hasn't appeared. Hang on,
In
there's a
which
Tony
case-
down the bottom. Who's the
Now-
Tony down the bottom?
What's that?
That must be Tony Lyon. Yep, no, there's no Tony Griffin.
No. Okay, well done, the presenters. I think we've done that far quicker than I thought we would. So thank you very much for responding to doing it as promptly as you did. Were there any outstanding questions, Frank?
No, there's no more questions at all, unless anyone's got any
I
questions
noticed
now.
that there was a note that someone had been to a school. Now that was Les.
Oh, yeah,
wasn't
that's
it?
right. I forgot about that.
That was
Les got
Duragopper,
it.
yeah.
Oh, that was Les Winston. I went to the Tringle Isle State School from 1951 to 1956.
Darringale, Frank.
Darringale, that's sorry.
Duragopper.
Yeah. 20 kids went to the whole school. And we had inter-school sports, and it was on a handicap basis. And we had one family there who were excellent athletes. So we won 2 years in a row because they won all their events.
And we got 5% of the class here with us tonight. Well done.
That's right.
Okay, any other comments before we close? In which case, thank you all for attending, and thank you in particular to those people that put on a presentation. I think, as ever with these presentations, a huge range of things were shown, and I hope people have enjoyed their evening. So,
I
did. Thank you.
any comments from anyone before we close?
I'll make a comment, John, if I could. I'll make two comments. I think Philip Adams deserves some plaudits for doing a one-frame exhibition in 6 slides, which I thought was excellent. And I really enjoy these Zoom presentations. I think we get a great variety. We get lots of people, and they're well received.
Yeah.
Well, what have we got here? We've got 16, 17 people.
Yeah.
A normal postal history meeting would typically be around about 10 plus or minus. So from that side, it's obviously it opens up for people, and we get overseas people like young Ian Gregg for a start joining us.
Not so young. Well, can I just say, to support that, I think the big advantage of Zoom meetings is you can actually see the material while it's being talked about. You know, if you're standing up front and they're on the board, you've forgotten half of what was said by the time you get to see the material. And I think it has a big advantage in that respect.
Well, very true.
Well, it was interesting. I went to the Royal of London, and Ian very kindly conducted me there whilst I was in London. And there was the New Zealand display was put on, and there's a big display area. It's available from early in the afternoon through till 5:30. and then there is a presentation, which I think was probably done all by overhead projector, wasn't it, Ian?
Sorry, how do you mean, John?
Well, the New Zealand presenters, when you had the presentation, didn't show.
No. The London meetings, there's two formats. Very briefly, the afternoon meeting, which you attended, John, and then in the upper room where there's all that seating, if you remember, and it was nearly full for the New Zealand meeting. The president just thanks and presents certificates to the people who've actually done. But there are alternate meetings, 5 o'clock meetings, when there's a smaller presentation downstairs, and then there is an actual formal display at 5 o'clock. And in fact, there's one of those, I think, on Thursday. So if anyone wants to watch, I think it's the Metropolitan line, I think, and the Postal History is on Thursday this week.
Okay, I got it wrong.
No, that's right, John. Sorry, it is a bit confusing.
Okay, anything else before we close?
I'd also like to congratulate Philip Adams for getting his collection out and beginning to show it. I've seen some other parts of his collection, and I'm very pleased to see what he did tonight. Well done, Philip.
You're being softened up here, Philip, to do this more often.
Yeah, that's right.
I better attend.
Well, Philip did do a one-frame exhibit on his. Was on your halfpenny kangaroo, wasn't it? The one frame, Philip.
Frank. Yeah.
And his first outing in Adelaide, and he got a gold. So I congratulate Philip on that. It was very well done.
Clearly, it's gone to my head, I think, Frank. My CV now has a royal presentation and everything.
Frank, it remains for me to thank you for gathering this all together and putting it together in terms of a sequential display. When it goes up, will the missing slides of Tony Griffin's be included or not?
Yeah, they will, because I went through them, so they'll be included on there.
So it's actually, he's asking a question.
Yeah.
About whether a particular cover is philatelic. And I would just say to people, go through it, and if you've got any comments, we'll pass them back on to Tony. So I hope people will have a chance to have a look. But it's a Papua cover, so you might find it interesting. Okay, thank you all very much. And
Tony, Frank, before you go, do show us your glass.
I beg your pardon?
You like my disappearing glass?
Yeah.
It's because the reason why the glass disappears is because I've got a background.
Sorry.
It's the answer to Australian teetotal, I think.
I'm trying to have an alcohol-free day, Ian.
Anyway.
Okay.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you all very much anyway.
Good night, everybody.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.